वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरु गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वर गुरुर्साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। ॐ असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ पूर्णमद पूर्णमिदं पूर्णात् पूर्णमुदच्यते पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। Hari Om. Hi guys, who joined? Can I see them? Some more kids joined there. So guys, I want to tell you one thing that from next time. Hi Varshini. So what we're going to do is one of you guys can sing the front shlok, like those 1 2 3 4 5 shloks we sing. I want every one of you guys to sing every week, okay? And then everybody else will be singing in the background. You guys good with that? Right? If not, I can send you, I think the first class when we did it, I think I gave you everybody the shlok. But if you don't have it, I can send the picture of the shlok. You can read it from there. Is that good? Awesome? Okay. So, good. So, the first thing what we're going to do is, we're going to give a big round of applause to all of you guys because you have finished what chapter? Chapter 3. Awesome job guys. So you have read so far chapter 1, 2 and 3 of Gita. So that is amazing, and chapter 3 is the very important chapter for us, because what's the name of that chapter that we read? What is the name? Yes, Swara and Avika?
Karma Yoga.
Karma Yoga, right? What does Karma Yoga means? What's the English translation of Karma Yoga? Yeah, Avika?
Like action.
Action. So knowledge of action, right? That's what the Karma Yoga is. What we are talking about is what action we should be doing, right? This is the most important for us because our whole life we do action, and we are always doing some action, right? So this is very important chapter for all of us because it's the very basic step to go to to start our spiritual journey or our spiritual realization. This is the first foundation, right? So we did Karma Yoga, and you guys now understand a lot of things about karma, what to do, how to do, what is the technique of right karma, what happens, why do we do wrong karma. So we studied about that. So what we're going to do today is we're going to summarize the whole chapter, right? So what I want you to pay attention to is this chapter. We're gonna, after when we finish this chapter, what are we gonna do is we might play Jeopardy or we might take a test, right? So next week it might be a test I will give you a paper and you have to answer, or Jeopardy, whichever way I can figure out is easier to do it, right? So you will listen properly today's class, because this is the last time I'm going to talk about Karma Yoga class, and it's chapter 3, and you guys have to answer it. And then in the following class, I would like you to summarize chapter 3 and then talk about your summary, what you learned out of it, and what did you understand out of chapter 3. Are you guys good? Okay. So whatever I'm going to say, I'm going to revise the whole chapter today, quick short summary of it, and just write it down what you can write. I will try to write as much as possible, but if I cannot able to write it, whatever I'm saying, try to note it down, because that's going to be the questions, and that's going to be, it's going to be really easy for you to keep it with you for lifelong. Why? Because anytime when you get confused, you can open your notes and say, okay, what was it? Even like 10 years later, if you open the book, open your notes, and you're going to say, you know what? That's what I needed to do. This is what the right thing is. So this is the karma yoga that I learned 10 years ago, right? Okay, so I think you have a question, Avika? Yes, tell me.
So on the test, are we gonna have our journal?
Yeah, you can. It's an open book test. I'm not gonna ask you to memorize everything, but it's good to have that, because you're definitely gonna talk about in your summary. You're gonna include everything, right? So make sure you listen properly and connect the dots, right? It's very important to connect the dot. What happened? So last class, where we left at the end of the whole chapter 3, where Krishna Bhagavan talk about what happened, why do we do wrong thing. Then we figure out that why we do it wrong, because of the desires, right? Because we have desire, that's why it pushes us to do wrong thing. Then we talk about this enemy desire for us, and we figure out what happened with that. Where does that enemy live? How can we fight the enemy, right? So Krishna Bhagavan told us the enemy lives in our senses, mind and intellect. And how to fight through it? First we have to start with senses, because senses is the least one, right? And it is the contact between outside and inside world. Outside means outside this body world, and inside this body world. That's only connection is with senses, right? So he said start with senses. Yes, yeah.
Can you repeat where the enemy lives?
Yeah, it lives in senses, mind and intellect. 3 places.
Okay, thank you.
Right? You're welcome. So then we talk about that what happened is, where do we have to start? We have to start from senses, because that's the most outermost place where enemy lives, that connects us from the outside world. And how do we do it? Senses need to be trained and disciplined. Mind has to be concentrated and focused. And then intellect has to have the knowledge of self. Real self means knowledge of Atma. That's how we control the desire. So at this moment, when I talk about it, what is the first defense line that we have to create? Is discipline and controlling the senses, right? That's where we left the whole entire chapter 3. Now let's start from the beginning of chapter 3, right? So if we want to divide chapter 3, we can divide chapter 3 in 6 points, 6 steps, I would say. Let's talk about those 6 steps. So first step is introduction. Introduction to path of action. Second step is an intellectual appeal for action. And action is, you can karma, right? Second is an intellectual appeal for action. The third is emotional appeal to action. Emotional appeal for action, sorry. Fourth is the technique of right action. What should we do? What is the right action? What is the technique? Then fifth is barrier or roadblocks to right action. What are the roadblocks that come when we want to do the action? And the sixth one is way to remove the roadblocks, way to remove the barriers. Way to remove the barriers to...
Wait, what is number 5?
Right, a barrier to right actions. Roadblocks, you can write what are the barrier that comes when we want to take the right action. Yes, Sia.
What does number 3 say?
Number 3 says emotional appeal for action. Avika, you have question? No? Okay. So now Krishna Bhagavan has divided this whole chapter in 6 different parts that would be chapter. The last is way to remove barrier to the right action. 5 is barrier to the right action. Now let me also tell you what slok to what slok is all this chapter divided. Right? So slok number 1 to 3 is the first introduction to the path, right? Path of action. Is slok number 1 to 3. Then slok number 4 to 19. Slok number 4 to 19, God talk about intellectual appeal. God appeals to Arjuna intellectually why he should do an action, right? So he explained with intellect why we should do action, right? So that is between slok 4 to 19, that he gives all the appeals, intellectual appeals to Krishna Bhagavan and say why we should do the action, karma, right? Then emotional appeal is from 20 to 24. He emotionally convinced Arjun to do the right action, right? What action he should be doing, because you will see in the starting of the chapter 3, he just want to give away all the action, right? So he's convincing Arjun to do the action, right? Now fourth, the technique of right action is between 25 to 35. 25 to 35, he talks about what is the technique, how should we do the action, right? So the technique of right action is between 25 to 35. Now barrier to the action, right action, what are the barriers, what are the roadblocks, comes between 36 and 39. What are the barriers? And then from 40 to 43, Krishna Bhagavan explains that what we should do to remove those barriers. Got it? So that's how from slok 1 to slok 43, this whole third chapter is divided. Okay, yes, Sia?
I can't see what number 6 says.
The number is from 40 to 43.
No, like the writing on it.
Oh, it says way to remove barrier to right action.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody has any questions on that before we move on? You want me to read one more time all the topics and the sloks number? Okay. So the first step, so there are 6 steps that the whole chapter is divided into, right? The first step is introduction to path of action. That is slok number 1 to 3. Then it is an intellectual appeal for action. That is from 4 to 19 slok. Then emotional appeal for action. That is from slok 20 to 24. And then there is a technique to do the right action. That is from 25 to 35. Then barrier to right action. That is 36 to 39. And then the last is how to remove the barrier to the right action. That is from 40 to 43. Got it now? Okay. Let's take one step at a time and explain what happened and where did it happen. Right? So introduction to path of action. So what happened? First thing, Arjun comes from the second chapter now to the third chapter. And he realized that okay, whether I go with the knowledge yoga means Jnana yoga, or I can do karma yoga. Both will result the same. So why should I go through this brutal fighting and this war I had to fight? So why don't I just go and get my, the Jnana yoga and just be, done with that. I have to go, go for enlightenment. Why should I go do karma? Why should I have to, worry about fighting and doing anything? Why can't I just sit down and do, get the Gyan, go up to Himalaya, sit down in a cave and just meditate and sit there? I can do that too, right? So he would say, why I am doing this karma, right? So first shlok when he says, I don't want to do this. Why are you asking me to do the karma yoga? So in shlok number 3, Krishna Bhagavan explains that, you know what? If you have to go from here to India, you have to take a car and you have to take a flight. It's not either or. You cannot just go by car to India and you cannot just go by flight to India. You have to reach airport by the car. So you have to do karma yoga and you have to do Jnana yoga both. It's not one step, one thing that you can take and say, okay, this is all about. It's not or, it's and, right? Karma yoga and Jnana yoga. It's not only doing karma yoga or Jnana yoga, right? So he explained, he introduced the path of action between the first 3 shlokas, right? Now what happens is, now Arjun is very intelligent, right? He will not agree with anything that you will just say it, and he will say, okay, I will do, okay, you said that I have to do both of them, so let me go ahead and do karma yoga. Was it that easy for Arjun to just do it? He is very intelligent, right? You have to tell me the facts why I have to do karma, because I don't want to do it, but you're asking me to do, so you have to tell me why I have to do it, right? So now Krishna Bhagavan from stroke number 4 to 19, he explained why it is important. And how he explains it? He explains by saying, first of all, that he says, nobody can leave the karma and get the perfection. Nobody can do it. Everybody has to do actions, right? That's what he says. And then he mentioned that you cannot even stay. Your body cannot even stay without action even 1 single second, right? Why? Because even when we are sleeping, we are saying, okay, I'm not doing any karma. Is that right? Your body function is still going on, right? Your heart is still beating, right? If you say, I sleep, I don't want to do anything, then what happens? Your heart is still beating. Can it stop? Should it stop? No, right? So the action is going on even if you're sleeping. The sleeping is an action, right? Whenever we say I am sleeping, it's an action, right? So Krishna Bhagavan is saying nobody can survive without doing action. You will have to do action and everybody has to do action, right? Then he gives a warning. What he says to Arjuna, that if people who decide not to do action, right? People decide that I don't want to do action and I don't want to do, like how Arjun is trying to understand that I don't want to do action. What happened to them? What happened to them is they actually outside exterior, they can become like that. They can You know how you can see a lot of sadhus, what they do, they wear orange clothes, they wear like a Rudraksh mala, they put bindi, red bindi, they put red chandan, and they said, okay, I just want to take samadhi and I will go and do puja and I will not do anything else, right? So externally you can change anything you want to, but internally, if somebody would like just go without purification of mind, what's going to happen internally? Internally they will still think about worldly. So for Arjun, for an example, Arjun, if Arjun goes and sit down and not fight and he just meditate, what's going to happen? His mind will keep thinking, oh, you know, they were so bad for me. Why did I leave them? Oh, they took all my palaces, everything. I should have fight with them. Why didn't I go fight with them? Internally they're going to keep thinking worldly thing. That's what happened. And that definition, Krishna Bhagavan says, people are hypocrite in this case, right? So Krishna Bhagavan give the warning that people become hypocrite if they try to do without doing karma yoga. If they go and just sit down and do the jnana yoga, what happens to those people? Those people become hypocrites, right? And then he also says the people who control their mind can only achieve the perfection, right? So he's right now giving a very intellectual appeal to Arjuna to follow karma yoga, right? Then he also says that when you do worldly action, then he talk about different kind of action. So he says when you do worldly action, you are bound to it. When you do unselfish action, then you are free, you are set free, right? So he explained two different kind of actions, that you either you do worldly action. Even if you do worldly action, he said it's better to do action, even if it is worldly action, is good to do action rather than doing no action. So what is he saying? Action, even if a person do worldly action.
Wait, this is number 3?
Yeah, no, number 2.
Oh.
We are still at number 2. People doing worldly action is better than doing no action. And the best is unselfish actions, right? So Krishna Bhagavan is saying that even if you do worldly action, you are in much better place than the person who is very lazy and don't do any action, right? So he's saying no action is worst. Even if you do worldly action or secular life action, that is much better than doing no action, and the best action is unselfish action. So that's what he is trying to explain him in this. Now after these shlokas, when he says, then let's go to the emotional appeal, right?
I have a question.
Yeah, Rajan.
So for the first section, what does he say?
The first was the introduction of the path, right? Introduction of the path of...
Does he say anything like significant?
Yeah, that he's saying that you have to take both the paths, right? He's saying you cannot do either or.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right? That's the first, that he is introducing the path of action.
Selfless action.
What?
What does that say?
Unselfish action.
Oh, yeah, selfless action.
Selfless action. So then after that he talks about, so the person who is very knowledgeable, he's saying that the person who knows his self means that he is the consciousness, he is not mind body complex. The person who knows that is the only person who can stop doing the action. So who is the only person who can stop doing the action? Is the person who already is enlightened, right? Now stop doing action is not just sitting lazy. He is not mentioning that. He said why? Because with doing action he doesn't gain anything, without doing action, he doesn't lose anything, right? Because this guy is not going to do anything for himself. He's going to always do for other people, right? Unselfish action. That's what he's going to do. So even if he does any action, he's not going to gain anything for himself. And if he doesn't do anything, he doesn't lose anything, right? So he just giving a convincing fact to Arjun, saying that why the action is so important to do, right? So now he put the foundation there. He said, what is the path? Why do we have to do it? Very important. Now Arjun is intelligent person, but also an emotional person, right? He is going through this emotional phase of saying, oh, I cannot fight with my relatives. My relatives are on the other side. Those are my cousins. I cannot go fight. So you cannot just give intellectual fact about action. You have to talk about emotional fact too, right? So, and Arjun is smart and Krishna Bhagavan is very smart also, right? So Krishna Bhagavan understood that, okay, now Arjun got, I told him why he has to do the action, but I have to emotionally tell him why also he has to do action, right? So now he comes to the third point, which is Shlok 20 to 24, where he emotionally convince Arjun why he has to do action, right? So how does he convince Arjun? He talks about other people who did it, right? He mentioned which Raja? Anybody remember? Raja Janak. You remember? He talks about Raja Janak only doing karma yoga. He got enlightened. So he gave an example and he said there are many other who did karma yoga and got enlightened. So he just emotionally telling him, you respect those people. Those people also did karma yoga, and that's how they led their life peacefully and happily. So this is the example that you need to see. Then he said, you know how powerful I am? Now he is talking about himself. He is saying that, I am so powerful, but you have ever seen me not doing action? I am always doing action. In this,
Is Krishna Bhagavan talking?
yeah, he is saying that in this whole three lokas, the heaven, hell and earth that he talks about. So in these three lokas, there is nothing that I cannot achieve. I can get anything and everything. But have you seen me not doing action? Right? I'm doing action all the time, even though I don't need to do action. Krishna Bhagavan doesn't have to do anything, right? He can, if he wants a glass of water, he can just do like this and glass of water will come or something, like, right? He's God and he has all the power, but he's doing action. So he's talking about, even if I don't need it, still you see me doing action. So he gave an example of himself. Then he talks about what happened if nobody does action. So then what's going to happen is the whole nature, Prakriti will stop, and the Prakriti the whole world will destroy if the action stops. So then he gives a threat here, saying that whole Prakriti will stop and there will be no action done if everybody stops doing action, right? And then he also, it's a fear and a threat both, saying that, hey, everything will stop if we stop doing action. So emotionally he went through all the stages to explain him that why the action is required, right? He talks about other big people example that Arjuna respects, right? Like if I come and say, Sane, or I will say to Krish, Krish, Sane is doing this, why don't you do it too? So that's what Krishna Bhagavan is saying. Raja Janak did this, why don't you do that too? Then I would say to Krish, I do it too, why don't you do it? So Krishna Bhagavan said, I do it too, why don't you do it, right? Then say, if I don't do it, this is what the consequences are. Do you want to take those consequences, right? And then if you don't do it, this is what the consequences are. So emotionally he gave all 4 steps. Talking about other people, giving an example that whom he respects, then talking about himself, his friend, Krishna Bhagavan, and all the consequences that's going to happen if they don't take the actions, right? So that's what happened with the third thing, emotional appeal for the action, right? Now the technique of right action, karma, right? So now technique of what technique we should be using to do the right actions. So what was the first thing that he said? He said first that the technique that we should be using is that we should know what is our basic nature is. That's what you should be doing. That's what you should be doing the karma with, right? The basic action. All your duty needs to be done according to your basic action. Now, we do most of all our action is to fulfill our desire, right? That's where we start from. So when we do it, we have to think about what is our basic nature. So we do all the action according to our basic nature, right? Now, superior is our dharma, swadharma. Swadharma means our dharma. Then the paradharma means others' dharma, others' duty. Even though if our dharma, if doing our duties, we do find lot of defects. You remember that slok? It is very important slok for us right now. Right? What we are strong at, our dharma means our duty, right? So what are we strong at? That's what we need to be doing it rather than doing somebody else's duty. Why? Because even if we have little bit defect in our own strength, we should still do what we are strong at. We should not take other people's job and do that job, because we are not strong at, we will never be happy, right? So that's very important for us to understand. So always, which is more higher, doing your own duty, that is your basic nature, your own dharma is. Don't do, even if it is little bit defectful, you still keep doing your own duties with your own swadharma, means your own strength. You got that point? So now he explains how our basic nature is derived from, right? How is our basic nature comes from? Our basic nature comes from Prakriti, right? The nature. And what is Prakriti made up of? Prakriti is made up of? Sane.
Is it tamasic, rajasic, sattvic?
You got it. So it is made up of 3 gunas, right? Tamasic, rajasic and sattvic. So now, depending on that, we find our strength, and that's what we need to do our job, our duties, right? That's what Krishna wants. So technique of doing the right actions is first find what is your strength, what basic nature, by depending on these 3 gunas, where you lie, and then you do that duty that you are, your own duty, but what you are strong at, right? So that's what he said. Now the last thing with the technique of action he mentioned, that is very important. He said the person who surrender all his duties, all his action and results to me without desire and without attachment. I will take this off so I can write a couple more things here. We are at 4th point, right? Techniques.
Yeah.
So now, okay. So this is the most important slok, slok number 30. That gives the whole summary of doing karma. We don't understand that, but right now I just want you to remember the slok. So he says, surrender all your action and results to God without attachment and without desire. And then he says, fight this battle. And again, we are not mentioning about battle, the war battle, but this life battle without agitation.
Wait, that'll allow you to have no agitation.
That will allow you to have no agitation, right? So you will fight, he's giving the answer that the agitation that we have, it will go away if we process this way, right? So he summarized the whole thing with this action, that what you have to do is surrender all your actions and results. We talk about this thing, right? That how, when we do action, we think that we are doing the worship of God. We are doing puja, right? And then the result came back is like a prasad to us. And we eat any prasad that comes from Bhagwan Ji. We don't say that I don't like this fruit or I don't like this food. We still eat it, right? So we are eating that prasad. So that is surrendering all the action, because if every action becomes worship, if every action is the puja, then every result becomes prasad. Krishu Bandhu gaya. What can I say? Okay. Most of you are. Right, so that's what he is mentioning in technique of action, right? So he says four things that you have to remember in the technique of action. First thing, that do all the action, figure out your basic nature, right? What is your strength? Do your duties according to your strength, right? Then the second part is that you have to do, the swadharma is better than doing paradharma, right? Even though you have a defect in your swadharma, still you do swadharma, means your strength, right? Then he says, summarize it, that surrender all the actions and results to me without desire and without attachment to it, and then you will fight this battle without any agitation. So he is giving that answer to it. Yes, Anil?
So wait, can you summarize we're on number 4 still, right?
Yeah. No, we were, yes, we are number 4.
So can you...
You muted yourself. Can you tell me again?
It says, I said know your basic nature, and do your duty with your own strength depending on the nature.
Yes, and then the last thing is that we surrender. All the work is done. Now, third thing is all the work is done by Prakriti. So third point is in that all the work is done by the Prakriti, and then you are not the doer, the Prakriti is the doer, right? So you put that together. And then the fourth point is surrender your action and results to God without desire and without attachment. Then you will fight this battle without agitation.
Okay.
Got it? Everybody good? Can we move on to the next point? Okay, let's go to the fifth one. Barrier to the right actions. So now between Shlok 36 and 39, there is a conversation between Krishna Bhagwan and Arjun, where Arjun raised this question that even though I try to do the right thing, why people still come and do the wrong things. What happens? Why do that happen, that even though we know that we are doing the wrong thing, we still keep doing it, right? So what is the reason for it? So what is the barrier to just keep doing right action? We still keep doing, sometimes we know that it is wrong, but we still do the wrong action. Why? So that's the barrier to the right action. Now what is the biggest barrier, Krishna Bhagavan says when Arjuna asked that question? Anybody remember? What is the biggest barrier? Why do we make the decision to do wrong things? Anybody remember? Swara? Desires, you're right. Krodha esha, kama esha, right? Karno, were you giving any answer, Raja, for this?
I was going to say desire.
You're awesome. Thank you. Yes, Saisha, you were saying something?
I had a question.
Yes.
So, do you say surrender your desires to God, or?
Surrender your actions and results to God. Yeah. Right. So now we got to know what is the barrier to do the right action, right? So in shlok number 37, Krishna Bhagavan comes back and answers that. And he says, what is it? It is the desire. And desire leads to anger, and desire leads to greed. So those are the two things that happens. Right? You got it? So that was our fifth point. What is the barrier to the right action? Now let's talk to the how to remove the barrier. So Krishna Bhagavan then talk about how should we remove this desire thing, right? So the sixth thing came, and where Krishna Bhagavan talks about how to remove the desire. So what happened now? We got the enemy. He says the desire is the biggest enemy, right? Now he is going to be talking about between 40 shlok and 43 shlok. He gives the answer.
What's the fifth again? Just a quick summary.
Oh, summary of the fifth, that when we know that we are doing the wrong thing, it is just because of desire and anger we do it, right? Now the sixth point, right? So what should we do to stop this, to remove this roadblock, right? So then Krishna Bhagavan explains this thing, right? How can we remove desire? Because we have to remove the desire. Desire is the barrier to do the right thing. How can we remove desire? Now, for removing the desire, it's an enemy. We need to figure out where does that enemy lives, right? So enemy lives at three places. Where do they live? We just started the class with it. Can somebody tell me where does the enemy live? Okay, let me find out somebody new. Ansh, you want to answer, Raja? I know a lot of people are raising their hand, but
Senses
mm-hmm.
and mind
Yeah, you're right.
and intellect.
You got it. Yeah. So those are the three places where the enemy lives, and then we have to defeat the enemy. So the desire lives at three places in our body, right? And then we have to defeat each places. Now we talk about this thing too, like the how the chariot compared to the human mind action, right? So we talk about how horses are. Can anybody tell me fast horses are? Who should I pick now? Risha, you want to say? Horses are?
Your five senses.
Five senses, okay. So Nishi, can you tell me mind is what?
I don't know.
Mind? In the chariot thing? You remember the mind?
No.
Look at your notes, you will figure out. Risha, you want to go to Nishi's room and tell her what is the mind? You want to run to Nishi's room and tell her? Help her out, help your sister out. I know, Swara and Avika, you know what is mind. I know. But I want Nishi to tell me.
Oh, I figured it out.
Yes, tell me.
It's the rains.
Rains, yes. Rain is the mind. Okay, what is the intellect? Nishi, you can figure this out too then.
Is it the person?
The person, who person? There are two persons in the chariot. Which one?
The one who's driving.
You got it. The driver is the intellect. Got it. Thank you, Risha, for going to her room. But she already got it.
She only helped me with the first one. I got the second one.
I got it. I know you know it. So, and then who is the passenger? Okay. Neil, you want to answer? Who is the passenger? This is not the harder question. Harder question is coming next. So, who is the passenger, Neil? In the chariot. You remember?
It's Arjuna.
Yeah, but what's our mind, human mind form, what is it represents?
I think it's the mind.
The mind is the winds. We talk about it, right? So the horses are senses, intellect is the driver. So what is the passenger? Varshini, do you know the answer? You can go and tell your brother. Oh, who is the passenger? You know the answer, Varshini? Okay, the passenger is, okay, I think Swara and Avika can tell the answer. What is the passenger?
It's the soul.
It's the soul, it's the consciousness. Good, got it. Okay. So now we know where the enemy lives and we know how should we defeat. Now we need to figure that out. We know where they live. So now figuring it out. So let's do, what should we do to senses to defeat the desire? Okay, Risha?
You have to train your senses.
Train your senses or control, or you can use control or discipline. All these things goes together with training your senses, right? So that's what it is. Now, what should we do to the mind to control that? How should we defeat desire at mind level? What is that? Anybody? Good, we are doing this revision, right? How to do mind? You know? Mind. We discussed that. Focus and concentrated mind with mindfulness, right? With mindfulness, we defeat desire at mind level. How do we defeat desire at intellect level? Yes, Swara. Oh, Visya, you want to answer?
The intellect needs to know knowledge of itself.
Knowledge of self. Awesome. So how do you defeat desire at the level of intellect? By knowing what you are really. You are not this body-mind complex. You are a consciousness. When you know that, that's when you can defeat the desire. So all three levels we can defeat desire, and there is different level. But where does God says you need to start from? You need to start from? Okay, Sanay this time.
Wait, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. Where do we start to defeat the desire? From which level should we start defeating the desire? There are three levels, right? Senses, mind, and intellect. Which level we should start?
Senses?
Senses, yeah, because that's the most outermost thing that brings us in contact with the world. So that's where we start to hit desire, right? And in the last shlok, God mentioned that objects, the senses are superior to object. Mind is superior to senses. Intellect is superior to mind. And then self-consciousness is superior to intellect. So this is very important, how we should start our process of removing the desire from our mind, senses, mind and intellect. So if you put senses are superior to object, mind is superior to senses, intellect is superior to mind, and then self, that is consciousness, is superior to intellect. And this is the first barrier, that and simplest one, easier. This is the easiest one to defeat the desire here. This is the hardest one. It starts getting harder and harder. But this is where we start. The intake of anything, that's where we control and we discipline and we stop. That's where we need to start it, right? So now at the end shlok, God says, the person, whoever, okay, by knowing the self, by knowing what is beyond the intellect. Now what is beyond the intellect, guys? What is beyond the intellect? Beyond means superior to intellect, right? Beyond intellect. So what is beyond intellect? Yes, Sanay? Soul, self, right? The real self is beyond the intellect. So the knowing that what is self, what is beyond the intellect, and then what do? Control your mind with your intellect. First you need to know this, right? You need to know what your real self is. Then you control your mind. Mind means mind and senses with the intellect. Why with the intellect? Why with the intellect only? Because what happens is, intellect is the decision making. Krish, you want to say that?
Yes.
Huh? Okay. So the intellect is the one going to make all the decision. And how do we know the self? What do we use in our body-mind complex to know self? The knowledge. You are listening to me. You are getting this knowledge. What organ are you using to know the knowledge?
It's a different one, but it kind of sounds the same. But
I think that's Cardinals.
Yeah.
Okay. So think about this. How are you gaining this knowledge? What are you using? Are you using your senses, mind, or are you using your intellect to know the knowledge of yourself? What is it? You are utilizing, you are getting from senses, but then it's getting to the mind. Mind is thinking, and then intellect is making the decision whether this knowledge I need to intake or not, right? So you are using your intellect to intake the knowledge or not. Your buddhi is the one that's going to store this knowledge in you, right? Your intellect is the one that's going to store the knowledge in you. So what he's saying, that controlling your mind with the intellect, that's how you're going to defeat the desire, right? This is the 43rd shlok, the end shlok of that, and that's how you're going to be able to do no wrong decisions, right? Because what Arjuna asked, that I'm going to, even though I know this is wrong, I still make that decision. Why? And he says desire is the problem. Then he says how to control, how can I defeat desire? So at the end, after explaining the whole thing, last he says, if who knows, knowing that there is something beyond the intellect, which is the self, if you know that, and then you control your mind and senses with the intellect, that person can defeat desire, which now Krishna Bhagavan very, very clearly says that the desire has a nature, two kind of nature desire has. So remember that too. I want to make sure that he says desire has two characteristics. One, that it is very difficult to conquer. Difficult to conquer. And what happens it is it is not never fulfilled. Desire is never fulfilled, right? So those are the two characteristics of the desire. So it's very hard, but how to do it? He gave us a formula. He gave us the formula, where the formula is what is the formula? Can anybody tell me one more time? Krish, you want to tell me the formula?
To conquer our desires.
To defeat the desire.
You train the senses and then have mindfulness to train your mind. And then you get knowledge of the self to train your intellect.
Okay. Train senses. Then plus mindfulness plus knowledge of self. Right? That's the formula. Now, what he says at the end shlok is the person who knows the self and control mindfulness and senses with their intellect can defeat the desire. You all got it? Right? So now if I talk about karma yoga, now what is the end part of it? What is the whole, like, what, you know, if I can summarize the whole chapter, not all these 6 steps, right? If I want to summarize the whole chapter in one, what I would say that first thing, action has to be done. There is no coming out of the action. Everybody has to do the action, right? It's better you do the action that you are strong at, right? That's the next point. Now the third point is that you will make the wrong decision because of your desire. To defeat the desire, you have to start with disciplining your senses, and you're gonna train, concentrate and focusing your mind and knowing what your real self is. You're gonna be able to defeat your desire, and you're gonna keep doing the right action, right? Now that's the part where here one more thing that he says, that which is spiritually higher than just doing the action. What did he say? He said surrender all the actions and the results to me, to God, right? And as soon as you surrender that, the bhakti comes in your action. And when the bhakti comes, what happens? Every action becomes the worship of God, and every result becomes the prasad. And that's how the action should be done, right? You got the point? Now another thing that you guys have to understand, that when he is talking about the action, the superior action, the most action is the action with unselfish motives, right? Until you do the lower actions, which is selfish for yourself, for your family and everything, they are still considered as inferior action. The superior action is only one action, which is unselfish action for everybody other than you and your loved ones, whatever action you do. So in this, Krishna Bhagavan mentioned one big thing that you guys should be understanding, that he defined yagna. Yagna word was used as the ritual, right? The yagna we do is the havan we do, like the fire ceremony that we do in Hindu. There is a very good yagna where we put a ghee in Agni. Agni means fire. And we do that. He actually redefined yagna. Yagna is not meaning that only giving the ahuti. Ahuti means putting the ghee in the fire. It is also defined as something that you do for higher idol. Right? Some work that you are doing, not for just putting the ghee in the Agni. That's not the yagna. Yagna is more about performing unselfish action for other people, and what you're doing for higher goals, right? Higher goals is serving others, right? So you guys have to connect all these together, and that's the karma yoga that God is explaining us to do it, right? Now, doing the last thing, right? I want you guys to raise your hand, both your hands, both of them. Raise your hands. All of you guys, raise your hands. Raise high, high, as high as you can, right? Now, think about it, bring it down. What did you guys do the first? What did you guys do? You raise your hand. When I said raise high, you could have raised more higher, right? So the first time when you did it, you didn't raise until how much you could do, right? This is what we all do. We don't work to our limit. We always work less than our limit, right? We did not raise our hand all the way high when I said raise your hand. What you did is you raised it, but not to your limit. So any action we do, we don't do to the extreme limit, and that's where the problem rises, right? That's where what happens is our limit is 100%, but all the action we do to how much? Some do to 50, some do to 60%, some do to 70, some do 0%, some do 10. Nobody does 100% at the first time. When we remind that you could do more, 100%, then only we raise our hands to the top, because this is my limit. But when I said it, how many of you guys went to your limit? Nobody, right? You went to some limit. You did not go up till all the limit, 100% limit, right? So remember this thing. Whenever we do any action, we have more than what we are showing, what we are doing. Our limit is more than what we are always do. So remind yourself all the time that whatever action you are doing, you are not doing to 100%. Let's get to the 100% when we do any action, right? That's where the success lies. Success doesn't lie with 70% action. Success doesn't lie at 20% of action. Success lies at 100% of the action. And when we do the first time, nobody has to come and remind you to do 100%. You should be doing 100% by yourself, right? You got it? Okay. Sunny, you have a question? Yes.
Wait, so desire is less than mindfulness plus knowledge of self?
No, desire can be defeated. It's not less than. Desire is defeated by this formula. Sorry, I put equal to, but it is defeated by using this formula.
And wait, what is the formula? Say, I got the last two, but what's the first one?
Train your senses. Train senses. Right? So are you guys ready for next week? I am ready. I'm excited. Okay guys, so let's turn this off, and then we will be waiting for next week. Okay, let's close it. Vasudeva Sutam Nevam Kamsa Chanuramardhanam
Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande
Jagat Guru Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwara Gurur Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Krishna Namaste. Sunny, can you sing all the five sloks next week?
Sure.
Okay, sounds good. Why two?
Don't we ever
Fine.
test?
And no, starting 5 sloks.
Oh.
Initial 5. Okay, guys. Have a good weekend. Enjoy your weekend. Take care. Bye.